Again, welcome back. We are here for this is our panel 10, and the topic is music education, the intertwining of educational disruption and music disruption. Before I introduce Frank, if any of you would like to go talk to Majestic Collaborations and their team from the last panel, they are over in the expo hall, glad to talk with you. So if that's a topic that brings your heart to beat faster, they're really excited to talk with you today about that topic. So I'm excited about this topic. This next session on education is something that spurred from Amplify last year, and Frank Heuser and I have talked about it now in different environments. I think we need Richard Niles to turn his camera and mic on, but I'm about to introduce to you the phenomenal from UCLA's Alpert School of Music, Frank Heuser, who is going to take this panel away. Frank?
Hi, thanks, Gigi. Good morning. We have a wonderful panel, and we're going to be discussing, as Gigi said, disruptions in music and education. So the first thing we're going to do, we have a great panel of 5 people, myself, and I'm Director of Music Education at UCLA, and everyone else is just going to do a real quick introduction. We're going to come back and talk about disruption. Akira, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Akira Nakano. I'm from the Los Angeles Inception Orchestra, where we mentor young children from ages 8 to 19 in music composition and music theory. It's great to be here. Thank you, Storm and Gigi, so much.
Thank you. Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Rocqet. I am a teaching artist from the social justice organization and music education organization Youth on Record, based out of the Denver metro area.
And it was snowing on Monday when we last talked. So
it was, and yesterday, but
and of course I simply said to her, "What's snow?" Richard.
Good morning. I'm Richard Niles. I'm a composer, arranger, and producer. I've been doing that for about 45 years. I'm also an educator and author. I was a BBC broadcaster making documentaries for 20 years, and I have a podcast now called the Radio Richard Podcast.
Great. And Kelsey.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kelsey. I work at the Young Musicians Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization that provides tuition-free music education and experiences to students throughout Los Angeles. And thank you so much for having me here again today.
Okay, great. And as Gigi says, she and I have been having discussions for years now about what goes on in the field of music and music education. And the word disruption keeps coming up because a lot of things in music education tend to be static, or all education tends to be static. So I want to start this off with a conversation amongst us about why are we discussing disruption? How many are experiencing disruption? That kind of thing. So anyone want to pop in? I want to get this kind of a free-for-all going on here.
Well, I think I'll pop in and say that it seems to me there's 2 meanings of the word disruption. One of them is, have we all been disrupted by COVID and the lockdown and teaching online? And for me, it's just been the opposite. It's been even better. And I've always taught online, so I find it to be very helpful. And the other question is does disruption mean finding innovative and new ways to teach? And in that respect, I'm all for it.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Well,
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this is good.
So please go ahead, Akira.
Sorry. So yeah, I think what's great, as Richard mentioned, I mean, the thing about COVID and how it changes music education in a way is in this virtual format, there's so many new platforms which do help to innovate. For example, if you have a mentor in online, we can still, as a staff and other teachers, continue to live teach and answer immediate questions in the chat. So there's this new interactive way of actually expanding and paying more attention to kids. So it's a new method. And I think how we figure out how that can continue when we go back to hybrid format will be great. Kelsey, sorry.
No, I mean, I completely agree. Richard, you mentioned, COVID being a prompter. I think larger social justice movements being a prompter to really encourage us to think about education and what equitable education looks like, especially, in terms of arts and music, has been something our organization has been thinking about quite a bit. And I do think that there are opportunities through, some of the challenges to maybe think about this remote structure as a continuing opportunity for equitable access. But that being said, I do think that, kind of going again off of what Richard said, we may have needed this disruption to kind of really prompt us to start making some changes in education. And Frank, you mentioned it's stagnant, and I would agree with that pretty wholly.
Yeah. Formal education tends to be stagnant and only responds to prompts from the outside. Nothing in a university would change in any department unless there were reviews every 5 to 10 years. And that prompts at least some examination. Michelle, do you have some comments on this topic?
Yeah, I will wholeheartedly and humbly admit that when I first heard about this panel, I immediately thought about the disruption of COVID, and that was it, because of how much interruption has happened in the music industry, how much interruption has happened in education. And so learning about the additional context and concept of disruption was wonderful. But I will say that in this time, we have been able to reimagine what we are capable of doing. And I think that reimagination is a very important part of the process in order to get to innovation and in order to get into more equitable access. As Kelsey was saying, was because we also saw at the very beginning, I work with public schools as a community partnership. And in that time where we first went remote, between access to technology and to those things became larger. So it's having to address not only how to adapt music education and online learning to that format, but also what do we do about this increasing gap for students and for people that we are trying to reach. So I think to reimagine is going to be a very important and probably critical stage right now as we go into another school year, as we end this one and we take what we learned and what was valuable. But I think we're at a very critical breaking point, because I know a lot of teachers are looking forward to going back to an in-person model. I had a hard time figuring out how to pace things, on an online format. But it's all to say that we can take this weird year of having no distractions almost and being able to reflect and how we can apply that to the upcoming year.
Yeah, a weird year. One of the things that, just responding to what Michelle said, I was amazed as when I had issues with teaching, I thought it wasn't working, the students wound up being very helpful. They were more than happy to jump in and be part of this process of figuring it out. So this was a valuable part of the experience, and is something we need to take into our teaching in the future. The other thing with me, this is an opportunity to actually re-examine what actually takes place during music learning, okay? And how it's compartmentalized. What is music learning? What are the emergent properties, the social equity issues and so that come out of teaching in certain ways, and how we can improve that. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's quite interesting what some of the people have said about this, because it seems to me that there is a problem, in my opinion, about music education in general, and that is that it's very technically based. It's very mechanical almost. Everybody has to hit the same goals, and I must say it's gotten, what I see in students is technique above expression. In other words, we're producing a lot of musicians with phenomenal tools and many skills, but with not much to say, not much of a personal story to tell. And what I've always done in my teaching is try to find out what that personal story is for each student. And really, I think if you have 23 students, you can get 23 attitudes if you ask them. And those attitudes are after all, we're expressing something with music. Music isn't, the techniques of music are just tools. They're like a fork. Mm-hmm. The food is important, not the fork. So the music is important, and what you have to say with the music and not the technique. And I find there's way too much emphasis on technique. Not that I am against it, because I think technical skills are really important, but I do think that we should be encouraging students to tell personal stories and find their own attitude about what music they want to make. And that's one thing that I think that teaching online has done, because it kind of concentrates your mind on the screen, and you're now talking to somebody and they feel, especially with private teaching online, they feel very free to talk about their attitudes and their own personal view. So I think this is all a very interesting area.
My take on what you just said is very important, what you're saying. I've been in contact with my graduates this year a lot because of the online thing. And I've just watched some of them as they create virtual choirs or virtual bands and orchestras work with the individuals. And these individuals are becoming more musical because they have this interaction one-on-one with someone who's concerned with this issue of musicality. And they wouldn't be able to do that in the ensemble. They'd be worried about the 60, 70, 80 kids in the class. Akira, you've talked about the need for developing technical skills emerging from what they want to say. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, sure, yeah. So I really believe, I had a background at the Colburn School of Performing Arts here in LA. So it was a very curriculum approach to music. And so when we formed our organization, we wanted to go at it backwards. We wanted to say, let's do creativity first and let kids develop their personality, just like what Richard said. What do they want to create? And then back in the music theory, because of course music theory is important because you need all of that stuff. But if you don't have anything to relate it to that excites you, how are you going to be interested in it and how are you going to learn it? And I think we're finding that this is a much better way to teach. And then one other note, what also dovetailing on Richard, is in our curriculum model, not only do we do group classes, but we do private instruction for each individual kid as well. And that is how you truthfully develop, I think, the needs of each individual student.
Michelle, have you?
Yeah, I will say that my musical background is pretty non-traditional, and so I grew up in choirs, and I went to school actually with Storm, and I studied recording engineering and vocal performance, and that particular program was contemporary. And I think sometimes the issue might be bigger institutions or sort of larger things accepting contemporary music and accepting more non-traditional ways outside of classical music as something that is viable or something that is appropriate. I work with mostly high school students, and I will say that a lot of things that we do is project-based, and that is to encourage them to tell their story and to encourage them to learn how to critically think and to self-actualize, and music is the best vehicle that we have found. So that I think is what, as everyone is saying, is that we can have the tools, but we need to encourage the stories and encourage the expression above all else. And so, yeah, I think it's been a very interesting time because I do think that students are more likely to share more about their lives, more personal things, and also just being unobserved when school is such a place to always constantly be monitored or constantly observed. They're willing to share more. However, I'm struggling to find ways to create a classroom culture between the students. So I have a connection between them as a teacher, as an educator, but I'm still trying to figure that part out. And I don't know if y'all have had luck with that, but I need to incentivize them, right, to come to class, to be social, and a lot of that is the social aspect.
Yeah. Really quickly, I just wanted to follow up, Michelle. I mean, what you're saying about the connection resonates so deeply, but I also think about for myself, like how connected, do we as adults feel to people through Zoom? And I think it's definitely more challenged. So I know for our students, it's been the same, and our teachers, our teaching artists have mentioned similar challenges. I do think, something that's kind of encapsulated by what we're talking about here is this idea of, and Michelle, you essentially said it, we've all said it in a different way, but music being this vehicle or this space for social emotional learning and development. And, this is obviously blowing up in music education as a theme this year. There's incredible work coming out of the New Jersey Department of Education. They've developed this incredible matrix that shows social emotional learning intersections with the visual and performing arts standards. And there's something about this year that feels like, as trying as it has been and as incredibly difficult and as challenging as it has been, I'm having different conversations with our administrators and our partners than I was in the past about the function of our programming in their schools and in their community centers. And those conversations, are less about, for lack of a better way to say this, kind of checking the box of having an arts program, and more about the depth of that arts program and what it does for students as whole young people. And not just young people, because our organization works with adults, and we work with, workforce development programs through Homeboy Industries. And music is healing, and music is, a space for you to develop so many different dimensions. We're multidimensional. And so it's exciting to be having this conversation in this type of a panel. And at the same time, this is, I think, part of, what we can maybe consider disruption in the space of music education. Which is why I think it's interesting to think about it, because we all know of music as this amazing place for emotions to take place. But it is disruption when we think about traditional Western Eurocentric music education.
Yeah, I'm going to pop in. I had the amazing experience for a couple of quarters of teaching a songwriting class based around songs of the COVID pandemic. And we small groups of non-music majors at UCLA. They're called Fiat Lux classes, 20 students only. And very few of them were familiar with any kind of production software. They all embraced this. And we started by watching the jingles that came out about COVID, wash your hands, do this. But then emotional songs began to come out. And the pieces that these young people created dealt with the experiences they were having, missing their parents, missing each other. Or one Asian student really spoke about how she was experiencing prejudice in her community. The neat thing about this, we used the little breakout rooms function, and small groups, the young people who were all over the world for these classes, were able to connect with each other and support each other. And they learned that they could really positively critique each other's work and grow by talking with each other. And the final concert they gave of their songs, everybody was so excited to be there. The young lady who was living in Bombay at the time woke up at whatever ungodly hour that was to come to class, that kind of thing. So there are some real possibilities here for human connection, and that we need to learn from and realize that may be one of the most important things we do. Anybody else have those kind of experiences?
Well, I just like to say that's great what you just said and what you described, and it's something I talk about a lot, that the arts has an obligation, I think, to reflect the spirit of the times. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't do that, then it's a technical exercise again. But what that thing that you just described is a perfect example of it. I mean, I wrote a song myself, which I released in December, called 2020, about these kinds of experiences that we've all been having. And I think when you can encourage students to write about what's happening now in the world, and I'm a guy from the 60s, so after all, that's natural to me to write about the times. And I believe we should all be encouraging students to do that. And interestingly enough, I find one of the main ways to get them to start doing that is to get them to transcribe music from the past. Because when they transcribe a lot of music from the past, they're suddenly saying, wait a minute, that guy thought about this guy thought about this. Maybe I could take this from here and I can take that from there and synthesize it into my own little style or my own attitude. And it's great. So I think what you just described is a terrific thing to do.
What you just described is a way to start music history from today and look backwards and create curiosity about it rather than we're going to start with chant. We're going to, this is just, and it's hard to get academia to do that. It takes a major disruption for them to think that way. Michelle, you were.
I was just gonna say, Richard, it sounds like you're saying that retrospect is 2020. It was a joke, but also this is, people will be writing about this time, creating art and music about this time for a very long period, and we will not really be able to see how much has happened until we're really out of it. But I think being in this time is very special, and I also think. I appreciate this conversation with this panel, especially, which is a reminder that we can now invite people from all over the nation, all over the world into the classrooms. And that was something I probably could have done before, but is something that is helping, I think, create a more centralized national conversation as opposed to regional, and learn from one another, which I think that's pretty incredible. So thank you for doing that.
Akira, did you want to pop in?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Michelle just said. I just think that it's really amazing that not only as can we bring teachers in from around the world, but we can also reach out and create these communities. I think schools sometimes have problems because not problems, but they're all contained to their own school system. But now you can combine different schools and reach out. I think different nonprofits like YMF, like Inception, because we have great multitudes of schools participating. But now this can become a model for general, schools in general, where they can just branch out, get students from all over the place. Virtual has let our organization go national, both mentor-wise and student-wise. And I think that is something that we wouldn't have had before COVID. And now how do you keep doing it?
Kelsey, did you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think everyone captured it. We're all in agreement. The idea of, globalized access is incredibly exciting. And I think it also helps us consider some of the challenges that, we think about when we talk about potentially the need to disrupt music education a little bit, which is the traditional model, at let's say like an adequately funded school, is you might have a band program, you might have a choral music program, and is that all that music is? And we know, of course, that it's not, but we also know the challenges, that come with asking an individual band teacher to take on an entire program and teach music, in all its different facets. And so the idea that you could bring in a music technology expert and video them in and have them support and mentor your students and bring in different disciplines and, capture and engage your students in different ways through music is something that I hope we're going to hold on to as like one of the positive takeaways, I think, of this really challenging time.
This brings me to the issue of how can those who are in the K-12 settings access the kinds of activities, expertise, and educational knowledge your organizations have? I mean, how can we break the wall down that tends to be there? I mean, I suspect that when we go back to in-person teaching, everyone's going to want to regroup around what they've always been doing. But people eventually are going to go, wait a minute, there were some neat things there. How can we cooperate with? How can we partner with? How can we create bigger communities than just ourselves? Any ideas on how that might be possible?
I mean, very quickly, our organization pivoted like all, so many incredible arts nonprofits did. And we had a turnaround where we launched a pilot for an online music academy within, I want to say, 3 to 5 days. And what that taught us is that we actually, it helped kind of synthesize and really think deeply about what it is that YMF does. And what we realized is it's filling a space that's not always being met in music education. And one of the key pieces of that is the idea of a culturally affirming and culturally responsive music education. Our teaching artists do this exceptionally well. They're incredibly passionate about this. And so that's something we're going to continue. So that's something you can be on the lookout for from YMF, I would say, in this next 6 to 12 months, we'll be developing it. And we see that as an opportunity to help provide resources to music educators throughout the country and perhaps beyond, if they want to, go to culture bearers and get a sense of, how to bring different cultures of music into their classroom authentically. And so that's on the horizon for us.
That's fantastic, Kelsey. Other thoughts?
Well, for us as well, for us as well, we are also bringing in world music now, and I think that ability to have people literally dial in from Japan and Australia to teach koto and to teach the didgeridoo. I mean, I think those are things that are really, really great for our students, and so I think that is what we need to continue. And these organizations outside just yes, and then we're here.
Okay. Michelle, you're involved with schools right now, aren't you?
I am, yeah. A couple approaches that we use in our pedagogy is trauma-informed practices, which I think in some shape or forms we have all experienced trauma in this time, which all means is something bigger, an event or something is bigger than we're able to comprehend, right? So our students will be experiencing this, and by acknowledging that, we are then creating safer places to learn, safer places to be, and to invite their whole selves into the environment of school. And that's what we want as music educators, is want them to bring them whole selves to express and to be able to bring. So that's part of that, and I think that will continue, especially, and we have to take into account that this last year will be the same, so that will be something that will be into heavy consideration as we approach the next year or so. So that and connecting to music industry, that's something that started before and will continue also, and it'll look different, and we're all kind of here in the conversation to figure out what that looks like.
Great. We have less than a minute left. Anyone have a quick word they want to throw in? Okay. Everyone. Oh, yes, Richard. Are you just?
Well, he just wants to say he's wanted to say thank you to everybody for all their great points, and these are the kinds of discussions we should keep having.
Yes.
And nice teeth.
Yeah, I brushed his teeth earlier. I want to thank everyone for going along with this conversation format rather than kind of just you talk. This has worked out in a much more exciting fashion than we could have planned it. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed working with each of you today. Gigi, thank you for bringing us all together. This has been great.
And thank you for moderating, and thank you everybody for being in this conversation. We will come back to the next panel in 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Farewell. Good morning. Good evening.